Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Anti-Federalist Radio, providing you with libertarian perspectives and opinions on current events for the liberty-minded. We are taking the fight to the airwaves as we stand for liberty, oppose tyranny, and give equal opportunity in exposing the hypocrisy of the Democrats and the Republicans. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Joe and Joe.
Greetings, folks. It's great to be with you tonight. We have a very special segment on Anti-Federalist Radio tonight. This evening, we are interviewing Stephen Difiore, who is the candidate for the North Carolina governor position. Difiore is representing the Libertarian Party on the state level, running for that office. If you wish to learn more information about him, please, of course, listen to our podcast. But you can also go to StephenforNorthCarolina.com. That is his own website. There you can read about his issues, his stances that he takes, and you can also donate and contribute to his campaign. So without further ado, I will hand off to my partner, Joe. Joe, take it away.
All right. Well, Mr. Difiore, it is a pleasure having you, and it was a pleasure meeting you the other week. Starting off, we're not going to drill you with a bunch of questions. We're going to hand you the floor. This is your opportunity to tell our listeners everything you want them to know about you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And yes, please feel free to go to my website, StephenforNorthCarolina.com. You can also follow me on social media at the handle @Steve4Gov. That's the number 4 on either Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And, of course, our campaign is an open dialogue one, so feel free to send an email or make a post and engage in, constructive conversation, because at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. I don't know about you, but I am very sick and tired of a government that doesn't seem to listen, and to politicians who are only interested in pontificating and bloviating and giving their, diatribes and demagoguery, but not actually listening to what the people want, what the people need, what the people say, and then working hard to make those differences in people's lives and in their communities. And before I could do that as a politician, I need to know what your issues are, to engage in a dialogue, and of course, I will need your support, because for libertarians, this is an uphill fight. The duopoly does not want any competition, and they do a lot to make sure that that competition is minimized. It's almost as though it's a legalized monopoly. It's very interesting, that. But on other issues, there are a few issues that are important to my campaign. So you can go to my website and you can see on the Issues tab, the main issues are education, healthcare, housing and zoning, and reform for North Carolina ABC. Now, those are complicated issues, and I'd be interested in answering any specific questions you might have on those things. Perhaps it might be even better to have folks, or you guys, Joe and Joe, drill into specific questions your listeners may want. But at the end of the day, what we're doing in this campaign is putting a different viewpoint and message out there for the people of North Carolina. A lot of people are sick and tired of Team Red and Team Blue, and they want something different. And this year we do have that opportunity. We have an opportunity to make a real difference and force leadership change, or force leadership to listen. And any change that can better the lives of the people of our state is something I'm interested in. And with that, I'll throw it back to you guys.
Joe, you can go
Well,
first.
Steve, that was a fantastic interview. I do have some general questions to get the ball rolling. Our major goal here tonight is that, like Joe said, is that we didn't want to be the ones to pester you. This is really your moment and your time to get your message across. So I'm going to try to be as broad as possible, and of course, time permitting, we can always go and get down into the details. So the way I figure it is that, Joe, how about we rotate off? So I'll ask the first question, and then you ask the second question, and so on and so forth for us, as long as we need to. Does that sound fair?
That sounds good to me.
I like
okay,
the sound
so
of it.
Stephen, all right. So Stephen, for your first question, this one's from me. What would you, as a Libertarian governor, bring to North Carolina's government that is lacking from your political opponent? So in other words, what differentiates yourself from them?
So one of the things that I think we lack as far as leadership in the governor's office is someone who doesn't think they know what's better than you or know better for your community than you do or your community does. So often our politicians, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they want to be your mother and father, and they want to tell you what to do. And I don't necessarily think, in fact, I certainly don't think that is the right way for that kind of leadership at that level. And I don't think it leads to good governance. As an analogy, I would want to be your brother or your uncle, not the guy you want to live with or have, take orders from or anything like that. But I want to be there for you when you need help. You don't want me sleeping on your couch, but I'll be there to drive you to the airport if you need, or to take care of your dog when you're on vacation, or to lend you a couple extra bucks if you're down on your luck. We don't really have a government, as far as I can tell, that is truly interested in helping people out. And I'll use this COVID example as this COVID situation to highlight some examples of this. There are a lot of folks out there who are hurting. The economic shutdown has closed down a lot of businesses. In fact, I read a Business Insider report not too long ago that postulated that maybe 85% of small restaurants, individually owned restaurants, are going to close down and they'll never come back. That's a big problem for the people of North Carolina who are reliant upon the tourism industry, all the way from the Outer Banks to the Crystal Coast to the mountains out in Buckham County. There are a lot of folks in this state that rely on tourism. They rely on small restaurants, bars, clubs, businesses that are being forced to shut down because of government mandate. But their rent is still due. Their property taxes are still due. They still have to pay for the licenses. In fact, in some areas of the state, like in Raleigh, for example, there are bars and clubs that decided, you know what, we're going to open up because we need to earn a living. And the ABC, that's the Alcohol Beverage Commission, has been weaponized against those small businesses, where the ABC says, you know what, because you're violating the governor's orders, we're going to reconsider whether we are going to allow you to even sell alcohol. That's a death knell for bars, for clubs, for businesses that rely on that aren't restaurants. And we see a lot of enforcement, especially around the shutdown, that is not even-handed and certainly doesn't seem like it's in the best interest of business owners. And I, for one, can't even tell you why that's the case, and that is simply inappropriate. We can take very solid measures to ensure that people are safe. North Carolinians are, just like most Southerners, a polite and considerate people. I go out and about in my daily life, and I see people wearing masks, observing social distancing rules, even before it became mandated. There are lots of businesses that will have hash marks on the floor saying, here's how you keep your 6-foot distance. Every restaurant I've gone to, or even coffee shops, they will spray down the entire seating area after someone leaves. These are solid steps that are taken to help ensure a reasonable degree of safety. And I know people who are really, really afraid of COVID, and I understand they're in the vulnerable category, and they're just staying home. They're just staying home in self-isolation. They have the opportunity and option to work from home, to get takeout, and they're just hunkering down until this thing blows over. And that's fine. That's a fantastic opportunity. That's a fantastic option open to them. But some of us, we need to work. We need to get out and about every day. But for the government to say, only some businesses are allowed to work and others aren't. That just doesn't seem like this is the kind of leadership that promotes either liberty or prosperity or anything other than just squalor and desperation. And what would distinguish me, I think, from my opponents is, one, the way I talk about this, but two, I really want individuals and business owners and local government to have a greater say in how these things are enforced. I don't want the ABC to be weaponized against people. I don't want businesses that are forced to shut down to still have to pay their government rent. We call that property tax. I still don't want to see people have to pay for occupational licensing fees that don't have anything to do with safety or skill, especially when we are facing down an economic crisis in the coming, months and years, where as many people as possible are going to need as many opportunities as possible to earn a living and get back on their feet. But, that's maybe one of the small differences that I see in myself versus my opponents.
I really appreciated your insight on that, and you reminded me of some past work experience of mine when you mentioned the weaponization of ABC. I actually used to be a bouncer in a fairly large bar here in Greensboro, and we would interact on a somewhat regular basis with ALE, which is alcohol law enforcement. They are, to my understanding, a state authority.
Mm-hmm.
And it just blew my mind every time we had to interact with them, because I have had absolutely horrible interactions with these people. They would come through the door. I've had them immediately buck up to me and confront me for being the door guy and not immediately recognizing that they were law enforcement. They have come in plain clothed and announced themselves at the entrance to the bar, but it's a huge facility, and attempted arrests of customers in the middle of our bar while dressed as plainclothes in a room full of flashing lights and loud noises, and then charged bouncers with attempted strangulation of an officer for trying to break up what they perceived as a fight. Have you ever heard of GHO, A&T Homecoming? Acronym stands for Greatest Homecoming Ever on Earth.
I have not, actually. This is a new one for me.
Well, there's a historically black college here in Greensboro, A&T, and their homecoming is basically Greensboro's Mardi Gras. It is this massive, week-long, practically festival. It's very festive around campus, and it's a huge party event all over the city, and it brings in A&T alumni and just black people from all over the East Coast for this 1 week-long festivity. When we would host A&T homecoming parties, we could bank on it every single year. ALE would come through in a group of 10 or more officers in plate carriers with M-Force. And I don't know how much you know about firearms, but it doesn't take a genius to understand that the ballistics of .556, you can't use a weapon like that in a nightclub where people are packed in like sardines without killing way more people than you meant to. And this was state government that was there to make sure that we weren't serving alcohol to 18-year-olds. And it's a rant I didn't mean to go on, but you brought me back a couple of years when you mentioned the weaponization of ABC, and I've seen it personally.
Yeah, and you know what? If you'll allow me to piggyback off your rant, I mean, I've worked in security in my past as well. And, one thing I've noticed, not just in my past work or is highlighted in your story or as was expressed in recent protests across the country, there seems to be a lack of accountability on the part of law enforcement. Now, when I say law enforcement, I don't necessarily just mean your neighborhood cop, but any executive agency that is enforcing the law of the government, whether it is a bureaucracy or an administration like the ABC or maybe the Treasury Department or even just your city police, right? That's a law enforcement position when you have government agents with the power of arrest who go into a place, armed or not, but most often armed, and then have the ability to restrain you against your will and put you in a cage against your will, and if you resist, your life may be forfeit. That's a very serious issue, and it seems to me that in this country, law enforcement on all levels seems to be very difficult to be held accountable when they are, overly zealous in the execution of their duties. Now, in my home city of Charlotte, North Carolina, CNPD, in my opinion, is certainly not the worst police department that anyone could interface with. No police department is perfect, but it's not the worst. And, there are instances where you have bad cops, and because in North Carolina we don't have police unions, those bad cops can get fired, right? But when you have a case of state law enforcement going in, one of the reasons that could be that your experiences with these folks for state law enforcement might have been so poor is there is literally no incentive for them to promote good behavior. There is no recourse. The mere idea that a law enforcement officer could go into a crowded bar in plain clothes and try to arrest somebody and then charge the bouncer when perhaps this is obvious confusion on the part of what's going on, the fact that that can't immediately be held up as malpractice or malfeasance on the part of the officer itself is a real big problem. And a lot of that stems from judicial policy called qualified immunity. And we don't have a lot of power to do much in the federal level, but we do have a lot of power, and the governor certainly does have a lot of power to ensure that we start changing the footing of our law enforcement in a direction that makes it easier for the bad actors and the bad apples to get weeded out. There's that old expression, a bad apple spoils the whole bunch. Well, right now, there's not really a good way to get rid of those bad apples. And what does that mean? That means the whole bunch gets spoiled, and that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing for the good cops and good law enforcement agents who just want to do their job and do it well. And it's certainly not good when you have to recruit future generations to your agency to be a city cop. And, people of good character and good standing will look at a corrupt organization and say, I don't want to be part of that, which means you're only going to get the corruptible folks. We don't really have any mechanisms of leadership training, like good substantial mechanisms of leadership training in law enforcement. If you want to be a SEAL, right, you got to go through BUDS, right? You got to go through really hardcore training to weed out the people that don't have what it takes. But only the very biggest police departments in North Carolina have anything approaching that. And I'm not so sure that the state-level law enforcement has that either, at least not to a degree that promotes leadership and the idea that you are a servant for the people. Yeah, you're going to interface with a bad guy, right? And as a common citizen, whenever you're going to be involved, like interfacing with the cop, you got to realize that they don't know you from Adam, and they interface with bad people all day. So you just go along with it. If you need to fight it in the courts, right? But the idea that there's no mechanism to weed out those bad apples is something that should be a grave concern for everybody, not just the common rank and file citizen like you and me, but for law enforcement officials and for government officials too. And this is not something I see the Democrats or Republicans really talking about. The Republicans go, hey, we got to, support the thin blue line. Okay, I got you. That's fine. But what about the bad cops? And then you got the Democrats saying we have to defund the police. Okay, but isn't the problem not enough training? So wouldn't more training and more funding be the right way to go about it? But no one really wants to talk about what could actually be done. It's just these saccharine, vapid bromides that people don't really, maybe they sound good in a sound bite, but they don't really lead to anything substantial. And that is, again, that's another thing that as a libertarian candidate differentiates me from my opponents. I'm not running for re-election, and I have no expectation that, I'm going to be given a cushy job in some bureaucracy or a think tank or anything like that. My only concern is better policies that make the state better and make life for everyone who lives and works here better. That is my concern. And I don't know necessarily, I can't see into the hearts and minds of my opponents, but I would presume that there's probably more to it, more to their what is incentivizing them to be involved in politics than just concern about their communities and the people that they share the state with. But I didn't mean to cut you off in the middle of your awesome rant there to piggyback with my own. But I'm very sorry you had to deal with that when you were working as a bouncer.
It is what it is. Water under the bridge now. Every now and then I go on rants about that job, but I mostly enjoyed it. We would like to keep the conversation going, though. Joe, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I've got a list, and I've checked it twice. So, Stephen, speaking of, and you touched on the heart of this, is that you brought out that there may have been different incentives behind the push for certain Democrat and Republican candidates. What do you feel that the Democrat and Republican parties on the state level have failed to address properly or at all regarding issues that our society faces today?
Oh boy, that's a big one. Well, that is a big one. Well, I'll start. You know what? I'll start with education. I'll start with education because education is at the top of my issues list on my website, and it's a really important issue. Education is a huge part of North Carolina's budget. Something just under half of North Carolina's budget goes into education. And just so you know, North Carolina's GDP is something on the order of $560 billion. That's a lot of money. And I think the grand total budget, and then that's just the GDP. I think the budget for the state itself is something on the order of, $55 billion or something like that. It's a huge number. So North Carolina spends billions on education, right? And yet it doesn't seem to ever be enough. Now, there are responsibilities that the government has in North Carolina around education. It's in the North Carolina State Constitution that education must be available and accessible to all. Now, what the Democrats and Republicans seem to think that means is that means, it has to be a government school. And it has to be the kind of crummy government school that 20 to 30% of North Carolinians don't like and aren't satisfied with. And, if you think to yourself, well, what do you mean by 20 to 30% don't like that? Well, every single time that another option besides government school comes up, right, whether that's a charter school or magnet school or, options for homeschooling or even parochial schools for that matter, people are beating down the door to get their kids into those options if it is anywhere near feasible for them. That means that there is something, at the very least, really, really good with those options, or at the very worst, something incredibly deficient with the model of schooling that is currently on offer. And that leads to a whole host of other issues down the line that I don't think our politicians are even well equipped to address, because it would seem that the Democrat Party and the Republican Party can only see to the next election cycle. But when we're talking about our children, our future, we have to see it decades down the road. And we are not preparing our children for the 21st century. We don't have classes that teach them about how to balance a home budget, right? Home economics. We don't have that. Kids graduate high school and they don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know how to put together a business plan. These are very valuable and fundamentally necessary skills in the modern age. They don't know civics. We live in a democratic republic where people participate in their government, and the people, these new citizens that these government schools are churning out, don't really know about civics. They don't know the branches of government and what they do. They don't know about their local governments. They don't know about the history of different policies, right? You could live in a red-lined area your entire life, a formerly red-lined area in your whole life, and never know it because it never came up in your education. That just seems to be negligence. And the thing is, the world is changing more and more. And what we have is a model of schooling that is being pushed that dates back to the Prussian war academies of the 19th century. The model is more or less the same. It hasn't changed that much. A little bit maybe in the 80s, but it's still basically a centralized, state-controlled system of churning out citizens who will either fight in the army or work in factories, be little worker drones for the state. But what we need in the 21st century is a new generation of people who have all the basic skills they need to be successful and to survive, how to interact with the Byzantine labyrinth of government rules and regulations that we have in this country, and to be able to engage in an entrepreneurial way to come up with the new ideas for the 21st century. No one knows what the next great technology or industry is going to be. It would make sense that we'd want students, our future generation, who will know how to make business plans, who will know how to run, their own home economy, money in, money out, how to balance a checkbook, these basic skills, who to vote for and what they can do, right? I hear all the time people saying, the president should do this, or the president should do that, or the governor should do this and the governor should do that. But sometimes the things that they're saying is like, well, the government, that person has no power to do the thing you're talking about. You're talking about a city councilman. You're talking about a mayor. You're talking about a DA or a judge. You're talking about a neighborhood association. What are you talking about? That's not what these people do. And it's not their fault. They just don't know because they weren't educated on it. And people don't know what they don't know oftentimes. And the fact that our state is growing so fast and our education system isn't keeping up, and every opportunity that people in, whether they're in the government school system or they want other options, every idea for substantial reform is met with so much resistance. Is a real crying shame, because this is an important issue, and it's going to eventually it'll be time to pay the piper. And I'd rather get out ahead of that than wait for the fallout. And we have that opportunity. We really do. This is the time to enact reform and change that really benefits people. And the solution is always more choice and more opportunity. There's no reason why, if you don't like your current school district, if you're one of those folks who loves government schools, I want to send my kid to a public school, that's fine. But if your current public school is in a bad area because everyone has low property values, because we pay for our schools based on property taxes, and you can't afford a nice house in an expensive zip code, well, maybe the school in the school district next over from you is much better. You want to send your kid there because you want them to have the best opportunity. There's no good reason why that's not already the case. except for the fact that the school that isn't so good might not do well. They might have to lay people off. Okay, right there, that's an incentive to do better. And if you can't, why would you deny the opportunity of a parent to send their child to a better school, right? That is a real big issue, and education is a cornerstone of a good citizen, and a good citizen is a good cornerstone of a society, because if we are a government of, for, and by the people, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we can help our fellow North Carolinians develop into the best people we know we can, the best people they can be, to give them the opportunity and the tools they need to live their best life. But we're not doing that right now. But we do have the opportunity to make that change. I don't think that change is going to come from the Democrats. I'm skeptical that change will come from the Republicans. But I think the libertarian answer of more choice and more options and more opportunity is the right answer, and that will be a significant benefit and boon to families in North Carolina if we can make that happen. Did I answer your question? Was that? I know I went off the rails a little bit on that one.
Oh, no, not at all. You definitely answered the question. I especially liked how you took the general and then drilled down into the specifics. So, that is where we give you the free rein to, take that and run with it. We're trying to make these questions open-ended because, in the end, this is more about you, Stephen, than it is about us. So with that, Joe, I believe that. You're more than welcome about that. With that, Joe, you're up with the next question.
All right. First off, if you're listening and you're liking what you're hearing, we are Anti-Federalist Radio. Feel free to like us on Facebook or follow us here on Blog Talk. We're also on YouTube, Spotify, and some other places. If you like what you're hearing from gubernatorial candidate Stephen Difiore, check out his website or check out the LP.org. That's the Libertarian Party's website. But, Stephen, my next question is, we seem to be gaining some notoriety, and people are starting to look us up. And I've noticed on Facebook lately, several of my progressive friends and associates are discovering us and looking into us, and actually looking into us and looking at Joe Jorgensen's platform. And then in an effort to discredit us, they'll just share that platform, or specifically the table of contents version of it. And we sound insane. I'll be honest. We sound crazy. Oh, well, she supports oil fracking. She supports privatization of prisons. She supports ending the federal minimum wage, this, that, and the other. When I have this conversation, what I'll say, and I learned this from Brent Ritter, I don't know if you've interacted with him, is he'll say, libertarians and progressives, on social issues, we are completely harmonious. We are night and day different on economics, which is the execution of that. I'm not going to convince you that I'm right about these things, but I can convince you that I'm on your side. And I'm sure on the campaign trail you're starting to encounter this. People that simply throw your platform at you and say, how can you be for the little guy when you support these kinds of things? And I'd like to hear it from you. There's a lot of progressive voters in Greensboro, which is where we're based, and there's a lot of progressive voters in Charlotte. Would you please, without sugarcoating it, sell the libertarian platform to them?
So I do know Brett DeRitter, and I've had the pleasure and opportunity to work with him in the past, and even currently. And you're right. He's got the right idea about how to do the messaging. He may not convince you he's right on the execution of a thing, but we are on your side. And to my progressive friends, or even my progressive enemies, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay, Charlotte is a bastion of progressivism, if you're going to find one, in North Carolina, maybe matched only by Asheville, North Carolina, right? And the thing is this, at the end of the day, we all kind of want people to be able to live their best life. Like, we really do. Whether you're progressive or conservative, certainly libertarian, you want people to be able to live their life and live the promise of what it is to be an American. That's what I want. Now, maybe we have a different idea about how to get out there and get things going, right? And I'll highlight another plank in my platform, because this is something that a lot of progressives in North Carolina come at me with, at least in Charlotte, rather. It's about health care. And they say, hey, Steve, do you support Medicaid or Medicare expansion, right? Do you support single payer, Medicare for all? Various progressive solutions to the problems that big government has already created in health care. And answering those questions directly doesn't make any sense, at least not for me, because the solution as I see it is completely a 180 from the direction they want to walk in. And I don't blame them. This is just their thinking. This is the world they've been exposed to, and this is an idea that maybe has never occurred to them. So I'll give you an example. In North Carolina, we have a series of laws called CON laws, or Certificate of Need laws. And I'll give you a concrete example. There's a doctor in Greenville, Dr. Singh, or was it Greensboro? I think it was Greensboro. Dr. Singh, and he had
Winston-Salem. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, okay, Winston-Salem. There you go. Thank you for correcting me. He had an imaging company. An imaging business. He was a radiologist, right? And he found out a way to use mobile MRIs to offer cheap MRIs on certain days. It's like, hey, listen, we're going to have an MRI day. The mobile MRI is going to be here. I can do, MRIs for $250 to $700 on a sliding scale, depending on your ability to pay in insurance. Everyone come out and we'll bang it out, and we'll get you the care you need without you having to go bankrupt. To get your knee checked, or get to your shoulder checked, or to get your thoracic cavity checked, or whatever it may be, right? And that's a fantastic, innovative way to offer affordable health care to people. I've gotten an MRI in a hospital before, right? And it cost thousands of dollars. In 2019, I spent well over $10,000 in MRIs because of an injury. And there's no reason why that should have been the case, other than I was prevented by the government from going to Dr. Singh and getting a cheaper priced MRI. Now, what happened with Dr. Singh? He wanted to buy an MRI machine. He goes, you know what? Renting this mobile MRI machine, this is great and all, but if I buy one, and these things are expensive, mind you, this is a huge investment, but if I buy one, then I can offer an even cheaper service on a more consistent basis for my customers. Well, this is America, right? You have all the skills and licenses you need to do a job, and you need to buy a new piece of equipment. You just go out and buy it, right? Well, in the case of healthcare, that's wrong. That's not how it works at all. No, you have to ask the hospital for permission. First you have to apply for a certificate of need. You have to apply for essentially the license, which is not free. That costs a lot of money. And then you have to ask the hospital association, hey, will you sign off on this, certificate of need form for me so that I can compete with you? And let me ask you, the listener, host, whomever may be listening to this, if you're a hospital administrator, right, or the head of a hospital association, and you're making $20,000-$30,000 in MRI, right, from what you get paid out by the insurance company, and then some upstart small businessman physician says, hey, I need an MRI machine too because I want to charge $500 for an MRI. Are you going to say yes? If he's going to undercut your business like that? If you're a smart and shrewd businessman, you're not going to. And that's exactly what happened in this case. That's what happens in these cases all across North Carolina. This is part of the reason why health care in the state is so dang expensive. Now, you want to talk about single payer, you want to talk about expanding Medicaid and Medicare, fine. Let's have that conversation. But you know what I want to do first? I want to make sure that there's some kind of mechanism for price control in healthcare. And what's the best price control mechanism that's ever been discovered? That's competition. That's competition and innovation. We allow that in almost everything in our lives. We allow that in computers and electronics. We allow that in cars. We allow that in industrial equipment, right? We allow that in architecture and building construction. We allow it almost everywhere except healthcare. Except healthcare. You can't get that competition or innovation outside of the government-approved lanes in healthcare. And the result is, increased cost. I don't want my fellow North Carolinians to have to go bankrupt because they have to get an MRI, because they have to get a series of x-rays, because they have to have some kind of surgery, right? Hip replacement surgery, joint replacement surgery is very expensive in North Carolina. There are places in the world, there are places in the United States where there's free and open competition on those procedures, and it's a lot cheaper. It's affordable, so much so that most people can just write a check. They can just write a check for that expense, right? How many folks have had to write a $500 check to get their car repaired? It's not nice. It's not great. You wish it didn't happen, but you need to get your car fixed, so you do it. Insurance doesn't pay for that. You pay for it. But because you have to pay for it, guess what? You don't go bankrupt to fix your car. Why should that be the same thing with something even more important? Your body. Your body is the most important thing in the world. I would find a way to come up with $500 for an MRI. I don't have a way to come up with $30,000 for an MRI. And that's a situation that we've put our fellow Americans in. The progressives have a heart, man. They care about people. And what I want to convey to my progressive friends and fellow North Carolinians is we libertarians, we care about people too. Maybe we think of things in a more systems approach, systems over goals, right? That's another way of engaging in the marketplace of ideas to find better solutions, right? Maybe there's some aspect of healthcare that I haven't thought of where you can't have a competition model. Okay, well, we'll talk about that specific thing then. But for something like MRIs or non-life-threatening procedures or non-emergency care, there are a whole host of options that we can put on the table to ensure that costs aren't so far out of reach that people have no choice but to pay outrageous health insurance premiums so that they don't actually have to go bankrupt. And, Lord help them if they actually have to foot the bill for a medical procedure that wasn't covered because of, some trick of a contract. We can do better. And, I would be willing and eager to engage in any conversation about a substantive issue with progressive North Carolinians who want to know more about what's going on in the libertarian mindset and how we perceive problems in North Carolina or even in America at large, and the ways in which we would go about righting those issues, fixing them, addressing them. At the end of the day, if you want anyone who wants to have a good faith argument or discussion with me, I am open to it, right? Because my sole motivation here is to make North Carolina better for North Carolinians. And I'm annoyingly optimistic that I think we can do that, absolutely. It just takes better leadership. And we do deserve better. I mean, that's what I believe. I hope that's what you believe. And that's what I want. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I am out there campaigning, talking with people, putting myself out there in the public eye, weathering the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as some great poet once said, so that we can make the state a better state. And it takes all ideas, right? progressive, conservative, libertarian. We can take those different views and come together and form an actionable plan that really addresses these issues on a concrete level, so that, again, North Carolinians have the opportunity and ability to seek out their own prosperity, their fortunes, their livelihoods, to live their best life, to live, work, and raise a family in the way that we all know we should, and the way we all can. That's the American dream. That's the American promise, the shining city on the hill argument. We can make that happen, but it just takes the strength of character to have a discussion and to not be swayed by the corrupting influences that are too often found in higher levels of government. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
So just to recap, guys, you are listening to Anti-Federalist Radio right now. We're having candidate Stephen Difiore, who is running for the office of governor in North Carolina. If you wish to support Stephen, you can reach his website at stephenfornorthcarolina.com. There you can hear his story, you can see his issues, and you can also get involved. And also be sure to click on the donate button if you go there. I'm sure Stephen could use your help. Also, if you're interested in libertarianism, if you're interested in supporting the Libertarian Party, you can go to lp.org. That is where you can see the Libertarian platform and see the kind of background that helps shape some of Stephen's outlook and political philosophy. And on the North Carolina state level, you can go to lpnc.org. Again, that is the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. Also, make sure that you follow Stephen on Facebook. You can also follow him on Twitter. And just show him some support and some love. So moving on, we're beginning to enter into the latter part of our podcast, Stephen. And so with that, I want to go ahead and announce, and if we do, is that we will take callers if they want to come on and ask you some questions, if you would be okay with that.
I absolutely would. I welcome it.
All right. But saying that, let's continue on. My next question for you is I want to get down to something specific, because we have covered a variety of topics, and I'm glad that we have. We've gotten very broad and gone very swath, and then we've gone down into the devils in the details. But I'm an economist, so our background in Anti-Federalist Radio is that both of us are named Joe, and I am the person with the economic background. My co-host is one of more of the political activist background, so we complement each other perfectly. So I'm going to ask you something that's more related to the econ side of political philosophy and political policy, and that is regarding North Carolina's fiscal and tax policies. Now, in this one, Stephen, you can answer this one as specific or as general as you want. I am not here to call you out on the spot on what you know and what you don't know. But what I want to do is get a pulse of what do you think about the size and scope of North Carolina's government? Do you think it's too large? Do you think it's too little? Or do you think it's just inept and it just needs some tweaking? And also in regards to tax policies, do you agree with North Carolina's tax policies? If not, what things would you like changed? Do you have any concerns about the state debt levels or on the local levels? The ball is yours on this one.
I got you. Now, I will say I'm not an economist. I have read some Hayek, and I would probably describe myself in the Austrian school of economics. I have an affinity toward laissez-faire ideals regarding economics, but again, I'm not an economist. Now, as far as the size and scope of North Carolina's government, I'm originally from New York State. Please don't hold that against me. And coming from a place like New York, where the government is gigantic, my opinions on the size of government might be a little skewed. So North Carolina's government doesn't seem all that big from my perspective, coming from a place like New York originally. But I've lived down here for, since 2004, so that's a long enough time to get used to what North Carolina is all about. And I honestly think that there are certain aspects of North Carolina's government that are too big, that are too expansive into specific industries. ABC is one of them. CON laws are another. These are tendrils of power that have, gone out from the core of government in North Carolina into specific industries and are basically making things more difficult than they should be. As far as the tax rates and the debt, again, I'm not an economist, but I think the total debt rate is somewhere around $7 billion. And given that the GDP of North Carolina is, almost a little over $500 billion, I don't think $7 billion in debt is unmanageable. North Carolina does have something of a rainy day fund, and I know there's some economic stuff with debts. For example, in Charlotte, for example, in Mecklenburg County, we do bonds to pay for specific projects, bonds that are voted on by the people, and so that probably factors into that total debt level, I think, but I'm not sure. And I'll say this on the debt: if a local community votes for a bond, that is that community's choice to make. There have been bonds I voted in favor in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. There have been bonds I voted against. And that is something that I think that's for every individual community to take on themselves. That's where involvement in your local level of politics is really important. But I do know for cities, bonds are a way that cities often get things done if they don't already have the funds ready to go. As far as the personal tax rates go, I would always want taxes to be lower, if at all possible, right? A mantra in the Libertarian Party is taxation is theft. And while it's probably more like extortion, there are things, there are two certain realities in life, and that's death and taxes. If we can get the personal income tax down to as close to zero as possible, that would be fantastic, simply because I'm not of the opinion that a person's labor should be taxed. If you work to earn something, that is you working to earn something. The government doesn't, in my opinion, deserve a single cent of your labor unless you choose to give it to them for whatever reason. Now, the government will need to do things, right? And the legislature is the branch of government that makes these changes. And so I would have to work with members of both the Libertarian, Republican, and Democrat Party within the legislature to get any kind of tax policy change pushed through. And, of course, the Democrats and Republicans are not going to want to go to a no-tax system at all in North Carolina. But if we can get it as low as possible, I think that would be a benefit. One tax that I absolutely think is completely immoral, though, and I will fight as hard as I can to either reduce it or get rid of it totally, is property tax. And this is simply because I think that if you spend your life and your time working to earn, to buy a piece of America, right, to buy a piece of land, to do with as you wish, to place your business or to place your home, that should be yours. That's yours. But right now we have to pay rent to the government. You're either paying rent to a landlord, paying a mortgage to a bank, or even if you pay everything out, at the end of the day, you still have to pay the government its property taxes. And if you don't do it, then the government will take your land away from you. And if the government can take your land away from you for not paying a fee to stay there, who really owns your land? And without the ability to own property, without the ability to truly own a piece of America, how can we really expect people to be able to live any part of the American dream in a real and substantive way? Now, if you want to have something like a sales tax where you bought a piece of land and after 30 years you want to move somewhere else, so you sell it, then, you pay essentially a sales tax fee like you would for almost anything else. Okay, that's fine. That's a discussion I want to have. But one of the biggest problems I see in living in a city, when you get new developments in poor areas of town, people freak out because they know that when the next property valuation comes around, their tax rate is going to go up. And that puts into place, in my opinion, a bad incentive to keep property values low because people don't want to be kicked out of their home. And honestly, if your neighbor makes his house nicer and your property value goes up, you shouldn't be punished for that. You should not be punished for that. It should only be a boon. Hey, if you choose to sell your home, you're going to get a bit more money. All right, maybe you have to pay a sales tax or a transfer fee when you sell it, but when you live there and that's yours, that is yours. So if I was going to say I would make any real substantive change in tax policy, it would be around property taxes, simply because it is related to so many other issues that are really important in North Carolina, particularly in our cities, with regards to gentrification, with regards to wealth creation and wealth transfer through generations, the ability to not constantly live in fear of having your livelihood taken away because of government mandate. If you truly own something, you shouldn't have to pay a continual use fee. And I think that's an un-American thing. I really do. And so that is one change that I really would like to see happen, and that's one thing that I'll fight for. Does that answer your question?
Right quick, guys, and I forgot to announce this earlier, is that if you do wish to call in and ask Stephen questions while we have him on, the number to call in is 516-418-5584. Again, that's 516-418-5584. And I apologize, Joe, for cutting you off on that. I meant to announce that before I asked the question, but I just slipped my mind.
No, you're good. I quite appreciated your input on property taxes. I didn't expect you to take it there. One question.
Well, that's what I want to be. I want to throw out some unexpected things. We get the standard, tried and failed politicians and policies, and let's try something different and new, right?
Absolutely. Our man in the chair, Paul, had a very interesting question that I'd like to throw at you. And it's not a matter of policy, but, nobody's really raised in a libertarian household. Nobody votes gold because mom and dad voted gold, and that's what we've always done. Everybody had to take a journey to get here. Everybody came from another end of the political spectrum to libertarianism, and I'd like to hear your story of how you ended up here, and especially how you ended up so firmly entrenched in our camp that you're now running for governor.
So that's an interesting story. I'll try to make it not a long, arduous tale. So I grew up, like I said before, in New York, but I didn't grow up in New York City. I didn't even grow up in the downstate area. I grew up in the Adirondacks. And if you Google Adirondacks, other than the fact that you'll get a bunch of images of chairs, you will see expanses of conifer and deciduous forests along a mountainscape that looks like it's an untouched wilderness. I lived in a town of 500 people, and that was not unusual for the area where I grew up in. The biggest city, Plattsburgh, New York, to where I grew up, is smaller in population than UNCC when I was going there back in 2005 to 2008. This is an area
that Plattsburgh, and that's its own story. That is the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I would love to hear that story sometime. But yeah, so that's where I grew up, right up there in the Adirondacks, right there in the Champlain Valley of New York. And so here's the thing about that. It's mountain people territory, mountain country. Mountain people, I think, whether they vote blue or red, are inherently libertarian without even knowing it, simply because they have to be self-reliant. They have to be community-focused. I mean, whenever we had to talk about the new thing that came out of Albany, which was the state capitol, it was always like a groan. Oh, my God, I got to go, and, I have to find some permit guy to assess my house if I want to build a deck. That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Really functional, matter-of-fact stuff like that. The town I grew up in didn't even have a police force, right? If we had a law enforcement problem, which was almost never, you had to call the state troopers, and the state troopers came in. And it's like, okay, the state troopers are here. Let's be on our best behavior because, they are what they are. But other than that, everyone kind of takes care of themselves, right? You handle your own business. And when I moved from North Carolina, I moved from the Adirondacks to the Crystal Coast. I lived in Emerald Isle. And again, Emerald Isle is kind of on the southern tip of the Outer Banks. It's on one of those shoal islands out there. It's a beautiful area too, but also very rural. Everyone votes red out there. But again, you have to be self-reliant. And so everywhere I've lived, there's been this thread of self-reliance, which I think it comes at the core of libertarianism. Now, I didn't hear the word libertarian until I was in college. And in specific, when I think it was the 2008 Republican campaign for president where Ron Paul was running. And, as a political science major, of course, I was following the politics of the day. And I heard this Ron Paul guy speak, and I was like, holy cow, this guy's making way too much sense for a Republican. What's going on with that? And I started digging into it. And it was like, okay, there's a core philosophy, a new political ideology that's more in line with classical liberalism, which I had known about. I was familiar with John Locke and Stuart Mill and things like that. But I didn't realize that had a modern-day sort of application. Well, it turns out it did, and that was libertarianism. So when I found that out, I was like, okay, well, that's what I am. And then around the same time, we had a gubernatorial candidate, Mike Munger. And I was starting to tune into North Carolina politics at that time because I had made the choice that North Carolina was going to be my home. So I better follow up on how things are done here, and the government is part of that. And I was listening to him and his speech, and I think it was Purdue running at the time, and then, who was I forget I think maybe it was McCrory who was running for governor as well, but then there was also
it was Pat McCrory.
Yeah, there you go, former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. So, but it was Mike Munger's answers to the questions that were being asked of him that made the most sense to me. And I was like, this guy's got the right idea. How is he not going to be a slam dunk for the next governor of North Carolina? And he was a libertarian too. And so when that election came and went, and the North Carolina Libertarian Party has ballot access because of that campaign, I think, I went to the DMV and I said, hey, I want to change my party registration. They're like, okay, what do you want to change it to? I said, I want to change it to Libertarian. The lady looked at me confused behind the desk, and she goes, oh, yeah, there is an option for that. Okay, here you go. And that was that. And I've been not a card-carrying member of the Libertarian Party ever since. That didn't happen until the Gary Johnson campaign, when I actually started getting involved in presidential-level politics. And that's when I actually donated to the National Party for the first time, and I got my membership card. And when I had reached out to the former chair of the state party, Susan Hogarth, so that she could put me in touch with the local county affiliate in Mecklenburg. And I've been involved in the Mecklenburg party and the state party ever since. Ran for city council in Charlotte at one point, more or less to learn how to run for office. And that was an enormously educational and that was something that was not only educational, but it was a moment of personal growth for me. That was an incredibly fulfilling endeavor. 21,000 people in this city thought that they liked what I had to say enough to throw one of their votes my way, which is no small thing in a city like Charlotte. So I've been involved in the party ever since, and I'm not going anywhere. I don't know if I was ever really left or right. Maybe I live my life more conservatively than some people, but I definitely don't really care how other people live their lives at all, which is more of a left-leaning perspective. And again, I do want people to live the lives that they want to live, the lives that they feel compelled to live, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. That is essentially the NAP in practice. And that's kind of where I come from as far as my background and how I came to be involved in the Libertarian Party.
Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. Would you tell me your hometown one more time? What was the name of it?
So my hometown in New York was Sable Forks, New York.
Spell that for me.
A-U space S-A-B-L-E Forks, F-O-R-K-S, New York.
Sable Forks, New York.
Mm-hmm.
The long story short on my story of going to Plattsburgh is my roommate and I went to Montreal for New Year's. And
fun.
I, of course, knew that I wasn't especially experienced in driving in the snow, but I also understood that up north they prepare for it better. And I knew the roads would be salted. But we happened to go up one of those years where, one of those blizzards of the decade came and hit the entire East Coast, and we were driving through it, and we crashed. And we bussed to Montreal from Plattsburgh. Had to stand out at the bus stop in the middle of the night at about -3. That's the coldest I'd ever been.
Oof.
Montreal was amazing. Bussed back because, it's New Year's. It was a holiday. There was nowhere that could tow the car at the time or do anything for it. And just got stuck in the Rip Van Winkle Motel in Plattsburgh for 3 days trying to get a rental car or something. And I got to tell you, it was the most surreal experience of my life. I kept asking people, how are you here? How did you end up in Plattsburgh? And the answer I kept getting is, well, it's safe. There's no earthquakes. There's no hurricanes. California's on fire right now. Got that answer 3 times. Well, California's on fire right now. That is a strange place.
The Rip Van Winkle. I know where that is.
I believe you. I have a picture of it with snow up 2 feet up the sign that says Beach Motel, and it's just hysterical to me.
Yeah. You know what? That part of the country is like a whole nother country. It really is. New York really should be 2 states.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely should. Thank you for that. That was just delightful. I'm looking up your hometown so I can tell people about it.
No, you don't have to do that. You really don't have to do that. I think they got
I'll leave that part out.
I think they got their first traffic light after I moved in 2004. So
I'll tell you what, you can feign being a North Carolina native until you're elected, and then after that I'll tell everybody where you're from.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe the small town bona fides will help me out. Who knows? It's a cute little town. So. They got a Stewart's in the center of town, and Stewart's is awesome. If you've ever had Stewart's cream soda, the best cream soda you'll ever have.
That's actually where the GPS pin drops, is right on the Stewart's shop.
So I'll tell you, that Stewart's shop is the community hub. When when I was hanging out with my buddies, hey, I'll meet you at the Stewart's, and that would be the first waypoint. This is before GPS or smartphones or anything, because those were only just coming into being in the cities, and they hadn't yet filtered their way up north yet. So we would meet there, and we'd hang out and get one of the little gas station hot dogs and a Stewart's soda, and then we'd head off to whatever mischief we were going to get into. Good time.
Well, thank you for that. That was delightful. Joe, you got anything else?
Not particularly. I do want to ask one final question, but Stephen, this is really your moment where you can wrap up and send any last thoughts out to what your listeners need to take away from this interview with you. So basically, how can people help you the most outreaching and supporting you? And, of course, what is the last thing that you want to leave with our listeners?
Absolutely. If you're interested in helping the campaign, if you like anything that I've said here today, if you have gone to the website and you like any of the things that I've seen there, your support is absolutely vital. The most important thing, and this is unfortunate, but this is true, our political system is a pay-to-play system. It costs money to do anything in politics, including campaigning, including getting ideas and messaging out there. So donations are very important. Anything that you can spare, even $1, $5, $100 at the most, would be just an incredible benefit. You can go to the website, you can go to the contribute page, and you can donate however much you want, and every little bit helps. It really, really does. So anything you can spare. But also more information. If you have any questions or you want to be put on a volunteer list, you can send us an email. You can reach out to our campaign. You can send a message via Messenger, via Facebook. You can reach out in my DMs on Twitter or Instagram. You can, send a message through the website. There's a sign-up sheet for volunteering at any level that you want. As the summer goes on, we're going to start doing more events. We're going to start hosting more in-person meetings. We're going to need people who are going to volunteer to go door knocking, to hang out door knockers on neighborhood doors, to meet the people, to do the sort of canvassing work that is absolutely necessary for a grassroots political campaign. If you like anything I've said on social media, please feel free to like it, to share it, subscribe to our content, and just get the message out to your circle. We have to rely on organic growth. It is vitally important that we exercise our ability to amplify our voice using the technologies available to us today. And we have more tools than we've ever had before. And it really does. It takes everyone's help. We all have a small part to play. And honestly, I'm one guy. I have a great campaign team, but really it's all about you, the people of North Carolina, fellow libertarians, independents, Republicans and Democrats who are sick and tired of a political establishment that doesn't seem to care about you or your issues or your communities. We can send a powerful message. We can send a powerful message with our vote, because at the end of the day, come November, we are all equal in that ballot box. We really are. And your vote is something that has to be earned. I don't think I'm entitled to it, but I want it. Your vote is something coveted by politicians. And trust me, I know, because I'm a politician, and I covet your vote. But I want to earn it. I want to earn it, and I want to deserve it. And I want you to feel good, to know that you have the opportunity to vote for somebody rather than just against somebody, to vote for something rather than against something. And if you have the ability, if you have the free time, the resources, I want you to be a part of this team. Go to the website, sign up, reach out to me, and we will find a place. We can work together, and we can get the sort of good leadership, good governance that we deserve here in North Carolina. And we can do it with your support and with your help. I'm Stephen Difiore, and I'm running for governor of North Carolina.
All right, thank you guys for listening. That was Stephen Difiore, once again, the Libertarian gubernatorial candidate for North Carolina. If you liked our content and you wanted to listen to more, please make sure that you like and subscribe to us. You can follow us on Facebook. If you want to reach out to Stephen, make sure that you can Facebook him. You can also go to his website, StephenforNorthCarolina.com. Again, that is StephenforNorthCarolina.com. There he needs help, and his main two goals are to raise campaign funds and to raise volunteers for canvassing. With Anti-Federalist Radio, if you have any questions, you can reach us at antifederalistradio@gmail.com. And if you want to call in and be a participant in our show, you can reach us at 516-418 888-5584 to call in when we're live, which is usually weekly on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. If you wish to stream and download our show after we have created the content, you can find us on Blog Talk Radio. You can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcast, and now we're available on YouTube as well. So all these videos will be uploaded and they will be shared. You can also follow us on Facebook once again. Like and follow us, and there you will always be updated with our content. We thank you for listening to us, and again, we thank you for hearing us as we are the voice of liberty tonight. And with that, this is Anti-Federalist Radio, signing out.